Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me here today again, I have Chaplain Carridwen Brennan, who is a chaplain with the Correctional System here in Colorado.
That's right.
You had said that there were a number of issues within the correctional system, specifically affecting what's sometimes called the LGBT, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender population.
Yes, it is actually a fairly serious problem. One thing people need to understand is that there is no such thing as consensual sex in prison.
Okay.
Period. There is no such thing. By law, inmates are wards of the state. They are in the same classification as children from that point of view. They may not make that level of choice. They cannot give that level of consent to anyone. So whether the sexual activity takes place between two offenders, two inmates, or between an inmate and a staff person, it is illegal, and it is considered to be abusive.
Well, I would think it would also be in a similar category to a breach of professional confidentiality in the same way as a licensed psychologist having...
Well, absolutely, if staff did, and as a matter of fact, in such a case, staff can and would be brought up on sex offender charges and end up going to prison themselves. Because it's...
Even if the client consents...
There is no consent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about whether the client said yes or whether the client encouraged it. It's about professional responsibility.
So there's that whole undertone of it's illegal. And yet we have adult human beings in prison for years. So that particular problem doesn't just go away.
So essentially, recognizing that these are sexual beings, we put them in an environment in which they cannot legitimately get their needs met in any way, shape, or form.
That's right. And then
is there any solution to that?
Penalize them for it. There are states that do have solutions for that. There are states that permit conjugal visits.
Okay. But that's with spouses from outside.
Yes, that is with spouses from outside.
If it's a single individual in prison who's a sexual being,
who has formed a relationship with a spouse from the outside. Some of these guys who are in conjugal visit states married someone while they were in prison. And the only time
can they form a relationship with someone else who's also incarcerated?
No.
It's just not allowed.
They can, but they will not be given conjugal visits. But that's moot in Colorado because there are no conjugal visits in Colorado.
Okay.
So that just simply doesn't exist. However, human beings need relationships. And they form them. They have to keep them just this side of sexual.
Okay.
Okay, by...
I mean, to me, a need is a need is a need. If you do not satisfy it in a positive way, it will find a negative outlet.
Absolutely, it will find a negative outlet.
But needs do not go away by their very nature.
Right. And hence, PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which makes any sexual act within prison a felonious crime, and it would be prosecuted as a felonious crime. Its intent was to stop prison rape of any kind, whether it was a inmate on inmate that was forcible or staff on inmate that was forcible.
But you're taking human beings who by nature have a sexual aspect and putting them in an environment where there is no way to deal with that side of themselves.
And so what do? Well, they form relationships.
But they have to be illegal relationships, which, with all the attending complications that would bring.
Absolutely. Very complicated, and yet they still happen. There's the term gay for the stay or queer while I'm here. And these are not people who would on the outside consider themselves gay. They consider themselves straight. Whether they really are, whole nother question. Not going to discuss that. But there are then people who were self-identified as gay, on the outside before they came in,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a particularly uncomfortable life while they're in prison. Especially in the case of gay men who are fairly flamboyant.
They would
There's-
wind up being abused frequently.
That's right. There is nothing worse than being a queen in prison.
Mm.
Well, no, there's one thing worse, and we'll get there. But other inmates go out of their way to annoy them. Staff
Mm.
do similar things. It's harder on the gay men. The gay women, and women in general in prison, are a little better at forming what looks, for all intents and purposes, like a family unit.
Okay.
All right? So they've got
Sounds
sisters
very
and mothers,
curious.
and
Okay.
even though sometimes they call each other husband and wife, their relationship is much more about emotional support.
Okay.
Are there sexual events? Yes. But the rape situation is more in the male facilities, and it has to be addressed because it's about, as all rape is, about power. It's not about needs of human beings to feel connected.
Which, when we say power, I think it's important to consider both sides. It's on one hand, it's power over somebody, but on the other hand, it's someone who may be struggling to resolve their own feelings of powerlessness.
Absolutely. A lot, perhaps even most, of the power over situations come from a person who feels powerless. And the way they prove to themselves that they've got power is by abusing someone else. And yet, lo, it doesn't work and they still feel powerless. So this is back to that whole concept of, do we treat them as human beings? Do they feel valued and validated as human beings? And, when did that not start and not be continued? And that continues to unfold.
In my understanding, psychological health requires a certain self-agency, a
Right.
certain feeling of
Empowerment.
having your own appropriate empowerment.
Yes.
Your own ability to make choices, and having your own choices to make.
Well, it's like raising a child. At each stage, you have to balance, I'm protecting you from yourself and the world, with, if you want to wear stripes and plaid to school today, cool. I am not going to dictate that choice on you. You make the choice and live with the consequences thereof.
And learn from it, hopefully.
Right, and learn from it. And it's the same way with inmates. They are not allowed to make choices. And yet, we need to teach them how to make appropriate choices.
Because it was their inappropriate choices that
got them there in the first place. Right, so how do we balance that?
Which goes back to a conversation we had on another occasion, referring to it as a correctional system. What we're trying to create is positive, healthy self-agency.
Right.
By
everybody.
the time they're released to society, ideally.
Ideally.
But going back to the GLBT question.
The situation that is even worse than being a flamboyant queen in prison is being transgendered. They are very, very, very few. I am aware of...
Which is a small consolation.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I'm aware of perhaps 5
Okay.
that I'm aware of. And for the ones who are pre-surgical, there's one person that I have dealt with who said, this is like being in testosterone hell. She had been on the hormones, she had had certain levels of the surgeries done, but not the final surgery. And so therefore her plumbing defined her, and she was sent to a male prison. A unique kind of hell.
Yeah. I mean, an extreme of isolation and not misunderstanding, but a deliberate kind of choosing not to understand.
Yes.
Not just a misunderstanding, but
No.
choosing not to understand.
You're so weird that I'm just going to...
I'm going to put you in the category I want you in, regardless of whether it has anything to do with your personal integrity or truth.
Right. It's bad enough to be transgendered out in the world. It is awful in prison. And there's no support for them.
And pretty much none of the systems in the United States that I know of are equipped, at the time of this recording anyway, to respond to that.
I am aware of one transgendered person who was in fact post-surgical. So she ended up in the female prison with the appropriate plumbing to be in a female prison. But many of the offenders were not happy with her.
The other people who were incarcerated?
Incarcerated with her, the other women incarcerated with her.
They didn't consider it legitimate? Or?
Right. And there's no way of dealing with that without the system stepping up and saying, we have differences. We have different cultures, we have different sexualities, we have differences, different religions, and we need to be respectful of them. We don't need to approve of them, we don't need to embrace them, but we need to be respectful of them.
Yeah, it's not about approval, it's not about agreeing.
No, it's just, this is the truth. And that doesn't happen. And most of the chaplains in the system are not only Christian, they are fundamentalist Christian. They generally do not deal well with the differently gendered. So there is no one that they can go to talk to. Most of the mental health practitioners who work in prison also consider them other. So they're not really getting addressed from a mental health point of view, like they had to have been before, because in order to go through the surgery, you have to have had psychiatric counseling for years, or at least getting the surgery done in this country. So the situation for the transgendered is particularly horrendous, and it's not being addressed. The situation is not good for homosexuals, and it's not being addressed. And in order for them to integrate properly, come out properly into society, and live a meaningful life, their issues need to be addressed from their place of truth, from where they are and who they are.
What we're really talking about is psychological health.
Yes, wholeness.
If you're going to release somebody into society who's not psychologically healthy, you can hardly expect them to do anything except reoffend.
Except reoffend, exactly.
The problem, of course, is when all the religious stuff gets mixed in.
Right.
And it's not about approving, it's not about agreeing, it's about letting them be who and what they are, whatever they find themselves to be.
And simply listening.
And finding the basics of psychological health in that.
And so because I am a non-Christian chaplain and a pagan chaplain and a Wiccan chaplain, and our religion embraces sexual diversity, they will come and speak to me or my partner, even though they're not of our faith, and that's just fine, I don't care. But we address them from the point of view of whatever your spirituality is, do lean on that, and address your gender issues in the healthiest way you can in prison. And let's look at what kind of support you have in the outside world. Can you go back to your family, or is that over? Do you have a partner on the outside?
Well, and if you can't, what are your resources?
Right. What are your resources? And what is the community for you? And that's one of the things our culture has to look at, is the sub-communities that people come out to. And whether they are religious or social or business or cultural, there need to be resources that resonate with the need of the individual, so that they can come out to friendly faces.
Well, and in that sense, to understand that it is a problem for society to have any marginalized population. Not that the marginalized people need to go away, but that the people who are considered marginalized or being treated in a marginalized way need to be integrated.
Exactly.
You know, we can argue theology for 1,000 years if it makes you feel good. In the meantime, we have to find a way for everyone to be psychologically and emotionally healthy with whoever and whatever they find themselves to
In
be.
the meantime, here's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We're queer, we're here, get used to it.
Yeah.
And that's what society has to do. And in ways that keep society safe. If you continue to marginalize people, that's who turns on you.
Yeah.
It's the lean, hungry barbarians who
Yeah.
come in and knock you over.
When you marginalize them, you leave them with unmet needs. And if a need is not met in a constructive fashion, it will find a negative way of
That's
getting
right.
itself
We'll
satisfied.
find whatever way. And that is where society as a whole loses.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be addressing and choosing to address the various and sundry differences that our incarcerated population is.
So, from your inside perspective as a chaplain, what are some suggestions you might make for ways that a correctional system could address the needs that you observe?
Well, they could be doing better with who they choose to be their mental health care providers.
Okay. Better trained staff.
Better trained staff. The same way with chaplains. Don't just say you have to support the religious issues of everybody in the facility. Mean that.
Mm-hmm.
Hold them accountable to that.
So, working against any sort of hypocrisy and any sort of professional hypocrisy.
Right. But more importantly, looking toward, as part of the reintegration process, on the resource handouts of varying kinds, on the Forge's site, there needs to be resources in the alternative communities
Okay.
so that people can
What sort of
say,
resources come to mind?
well, in the gay community in Denver, okay?
Okay.
Where is the community center? What sort of things are available?
Okay.
Okay, what processes can these people come out and integrate into? Here are people who don't think I'm weird,
Okay.
who are willing to accept me as I am. And
Oh, and-
that keeps people from choosing the downside of the response.
Okay. And I was going to say maybe even some examples or possibilities of creating new social networks.
Oh, absolutely.
I, just off the cuff, I was talking with a woman a couple weeks ago who suddenly found herself single again and looking for a partner after a number of years and had been out of the loop and didn't know where to start. And, asked, are there any websites for where lesbians meet or something?
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I wouldn't know what they were.
And it's like,
but
is the Three Sisters still around?
yeah. I mean, all the businesses, the establishments, the things they knew before, but the world has changed.
Right.
And they're coming out into a whole new system.
And it's changed for everybody. And every inmate comes out to a world with cell phones and you cannot survive without a computer but coming out with spiritual lacunae in your life and relationship concerns and who is my community,
Mm-hmm.
those are pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, which is where having some sort of connection with some sort of religious group might provide an initial social setting in which the people could get to know you, and if there are certain professionals in that social group, they may know of opportunities to which they could direct you. And so it becomes
Safe,
more personal.
open environments.
Safe, open environments.
Okay, where people can interface and then see if there's something that could become other to develop along the line. There are
Which
that
is-
for religious communities, but there need to be more of that for social communities.
Social communities, professional communities, hiking clubs, biking clubs, book clubs, whatever. If someone is just an avid book reader, well, that's a good place to start too. I would think every library you could find in the city would have some community bulletin board where you might find out about book discussion.
And you need to know about that. But like, for instance, on the handout sheet that we as pagans give to our pagan people coming out, where are the pagan bookstores? Where are the pagan community centers? Where are the open full moons? So that you can go in a safe way and other people can meet you in a safe way and
begin to create community.
yes,
Because
begin
you
to
need
connect.
a social support network if you're going to be able to deal with anything.
And so many people cannot go back to their families of origin. It simply is not a choice.
Yeah, it's not an option. And to make that assumption of somebody, it's really kind of cruel and insensitive. But in a broader sense, the other thing I think society really needs to look at is our obsession with the computer. It used to be that you could go to an HR office, human resources, which a friend of mine always winces every time I say that. He says, it used to be a personnel office, now it's human resources. As if you're a commodity.
Yeah.
And you've been objectified. But even that was a transition to now so much, perhaps the majority, of employment hiring is done online.
Online.
They will never see your face.
Nope.
They don't know what kind of person you are. They don't even know if you told the truth on your application.
But on the other hand, because of the internet, they can find out in a hurry. Okay, so
whether you've been incarcerated.
whether you've been incarcerated and what your crime was.
But so in a sense, it forces you to be honest, but it also creates a curtain by which they can't see you.
The
And
person.
because they can't see you, the person, they're trying to make a decision on the basis of a resume or a piece of paper.
And especially a resume that has a 5-year hole in it.
Yeah. And of course, if you do put it on there, then, there's already 20 applicants for 2 positions, and guess who's getting eliminated first?
Right.
And then when you haven't been employed for another year, they'll look at you and say, well, why haven't you had a job? And well, because no one would hire me. Well, there must be something wrong with you.
Yes.
Instead of saying maybe there's something wrong with the system.
Exactly. And it's the system all the way around. It's not just the prison system. Our prison system was created by our society. It didn't just grow. It
Wasn't
got
handed
created.
to us.
No.
We didn't inherit it. It is collectively created.
And the change in the prison system can only come from a change in society that says this isn't what we want.
We have to work together once again.
That's right.
And that just as
For the
we
good
had
of
to-
all.
We had to work together to create it. We have to work together to fix it. And the other thing we keep forgetting to mention in our discussions that everyone needs to bear in mind is that just by basic logic, people are being incarcerated, people are being released. The percentage of people in society who have been incarcerated is increasing.
Is increasing hugely.
And we need to create a society in which people who have been incarcerated can be integrated as healthy members of society.
And it simply becomes a piece of their past.
Becomes
It's
a piece of
over.
the past. It's over with, ideally. In the solution we need to create, it needs to be simply a piece of their past, something they hopefully learned from, but a society in which we're not totally dooming these people to failure. If society as it now stands, and no, I'm not recommending this, the only really intelligent thing for us to do is to kill everybody who does anything wrong, because once they've done one thing wrong, we have no way to reintegrate them anyway.
That's right. We might as well just shoot them because we are in effect throwing them away.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they'd be better off dead
Yeah, there's no way for them to live with the system we've created.
with the system we have now. Yeah.
But the point is that we are intelligent enough, we are compassionate enough, and we are conversant enough that
And
we don't
creative
have to
enough.
settle for such a ridiculous solution.
No. Create meaningful change that benefits everybody.
And that allows even ourselves to make mistakes and recover.
Yes. And that's it. There is no perfection.
Mm-hmm.
So learn from your mistakes and move on, and help other people learn from their mistakes and move on.
And collectively create a society that allows for people to make mistakes and move on, and that encourages them to learn from their mistakes.
That's it. If we don't penalize them forever for a mistake, they can get beyond the mistake and don't make new ones. Or at least
And when they
at
come
that
out,
level.
in their reentry into society, there needs to be a way that you can do at least food, clothing, and shelter. And
Reasonably easily. The first week you have to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, these are essentials. And if you, stepping out, I think you said in another show, a change of clothes and $100 bill, if the first day you step out, you can at least do food, clothing, and shelter somehow with only those resources, or whatever other resources you can find, be it a food bank or whatever, you're already doomed. What was the point of coming out?
Yeah, what was the point of coming out?
Which makes the most wisest decision to reoffend and get back in.
And so many of them do, and it even has a name, self-revocation.
Yeah. But it's intelligent.
Yeah.
In consideration of the current system, it's an intelligent choice.
Yep. 3 hots and a cot, you know where you are, you know what you have to do, and it's easy.
Yeah. Sigh. We're running out of time here. Any final thoughts that we wanted to add to this?
It's up to us as a society to choose to create the change. Don't put up with what's been going on. Create change now.
And with reference to the GLBT population specifically,
They need to step up.
they need to step up. We need to let them be who they are instead of telling them they have to be like us.
Well, and absolutely, but if the GLBT community is saying, we can help you reintegrate, we're here for you. We're not going to ignore you.
Just because I'm successful doesn't mean that I don't care about other GLBT
Right.
who need help.
Or at least, hey, it's okay, you can make it.
Yeah. Another one of the phrases I coined to Sister for my monthly newsletter, way back toward the beginning, maybe a good note to end on, is that life is a collaborative effort. We all take turns being the one in need.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, sister.